Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. Welcome to the launch of our new UK Youth Strategy. It's so great to see so many of you joining. My name's Kaylee Wainwright. I'm Director of Collective Action at UK Youth, so I'll be your host for today. We'll just wait for a couple of moments just for everyone to join. I can see the number of participants going up, which is fantastic. Just while we're letting everybody in, just a few housekeeping things. Please do feel free to use the chat. We'd love to hear from everybody where they're from, what organisation they're from. Please feel free to interact with each other using the chat and also to ask us questions once we get into the launch of the strategy shortly. We'll also be doing some polls to get people's thoughts and feelings about the strategy and the current landscape of the youth sector and young people as well. So that's just a couple of housekeeping bits. It's really, really lovely to see you all. As I said, I'm the Director of Collective Action. I'm really pleased that I've been working at UK Youth for about 5 years now, and I'm so excited that today we're able to have this event and launch our new strategy, which is really bold and ambitious, that takes us up to 2025, really looking at really changing the dial and really improving outcomes for young people. We've got a great range of speakers and guests from across the youth sector and different sectors, and we'll also be joined by other members of our leadership team a bit later on to take some questions from you all. So I think that's it from me. I'm going to be shortly handing over to Ndidi, who's going to do the most exciting thing and launch our new strategy and take you through where it is we're trying to get to over the next 4 years. So sit back. Hopefully you'll all be able to see the screen and hear from Ndidi shortly. And I'll be back soon to take some questions for the panel and also to hear from our leadership team later. So great to have you all here, and I'll now hand over to Ndidi.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. As Kaylee said, we're super excited to be having the opportunity to speak to you in this way about our new strategy. A poll has just popped up here, so I will not be distracted by doing it. Love a good poll. My name's Ndidi Okazi. I'm the CEO of UK Youth. Hopefully I've had the opportunity to meet many of you who are listening, and if not, really looking forward to doing that. I started as CEO in January of last year. So as you can imagine, it's been a really peaceful, quiet, uneventful first 16 months in role. But this is the most exciting thing that we've been able to focus on doing. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation. As Kaylee said, we're hoping for it to be a conversation. Obviously, if we weren't in Zoom land, we would have gathered together, and so please do engage. This, as we all know, a strategy is a live thing, and so we are really looking forward to iterating and evolving and really working in partnership with people. So that's the goal. So let me jump in. I wanted to start by sharing a short video that I think is a really great kind of montage of clips that we kind of found that really speak to the why of youth work. And those of you that know me know that I'm very passionate about why and being able to answer that question. And so really grounding our strategy in this, I think, is really important. So sit back and enjoy. You may even get some good questions from this that you want to share. So feel free to not jot them down.
Youth work is, well,
it's a $60 million question.
It's really.
I don't even know, to be honest. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. It's what it says, isn't it? Like, youth work is to work with youth.
It's teaching young people skills of life, how to create their character, how to give off a persona, how to be confident, give them the tools to get out there and be the best that they can be.
So as a youth worker, I always try and go back to when I was 15 or 14 and think, what was I going through and how can I create a space that enables young people to be free or to have a freedom, have a sense of agency and a sense of who they are to direct it for themselves. And that's what youth work means to me, or how I try to practice it.
The power of youth work is often quite subtle, and even in the relationship while it's happening, it may not look like much is happening. And it's the type of phenomena that in reflection you can look back and then be like, wow, especially from the young person's point of view. I've been in a situation where I've had young people come back to me and say that they've remembered certain conversations that for me was just conversation, but it's had an impact on them. And then there's obviously an ability to be a bit more calculated with it and say, I want to strategically introduce young people to doing this, this and this with the means to achieving something.
What made youth work different from schools was that the curriculum was not an imposed curriculum. I always thought that the curriculum ought to be something that the young people had access to, but I did think there had to be a curriculum.
Yes.
You did have to have things on offer. You couldn't just turn to
a program.
You couldn't turn to a young person who'd never had any options in life and say, what do you want to do? Because they didn't know. Yeah, they hadn't been very far. They hadn't perhaps been beyond the end of their road. So you had to say, look, there's this, this and this, not just say, what do you want to do?
Yeah, it was my first time visiting the countryside. Before that, I grew up in Plaistow, East London, and I just saw tower blocks and council flats, maybe a few trees over Greengate Park or something like that. But suddenly we were out in this beautiful house in the countryside, outdoor swimming pool, we went canoeing, we were like looking at insects and, worms and pond life and just all these beautiful things that you just never had an opportunity to see when you were in East London, and it was just amazing. And you also had a laugh.
I would describe what happened in youth service as being a very rapid climb up to the early 80s and then a very long and slow decline. There's a requirement in the 44 Education Act to provide out of school services for young people that doesn't specifically say what they are and how they should be run. So the consequence is it's an easy cut for local authorities.
An awful lot of people who are in a position of power, in a position of influence in terms of funding, really do not understand what a youth service in an area actually does and how it makes a difference.
Well, we've always boasted that we're great communicators in youth work. We're supposed to be the communication specialists. We need to talk to people in the language that they understand. And we say we can do this, but we don't seem to be able to do it with funders and investors. We've got to justify our practice, and we've got to find a language to do that, and that's our challenge.
You can't just have youth work in isolation. You can't just have a centre and not be aware of what's around you. You have to have the buy-in of the community, you have the buy-in of the politics, you have to have the buy-in of the families, of everything. And so we've got our supporters, and without people supporting us to carry on delivering youth work, we couldn't do it.
The biggest challenge at the moment is about funding.
That is the key problem for youth work, is how they're going to be resourced in 10 years' time. Because there's a real danger that it might disappear altogether.
Without youth clubs, for me, I think there would have been a massive hole in my teenage years. A massive, massive hole. So many opportunities that I wouldn't have realised were available for me.
Youth services, youth workers and youth centres have been part of the community fabric since the Second World War. But despite that, many are still unaware of the endless benefits these groups have on young people today.
It's never going to be easy, because I think the key to youth work is almost its ambiguity, that it can't be a targeted service entirely, because then it ceases to be a voluntary one. You're saying, you fit the criteria, you can come in, yeah? And as soon as we start saying that to young people, I think it's stopped being youth work. It's become some kind of referral system.
There's no greater model than actually working with young people on their terms and in their area, and that is a success of youth work, and that's why it's priceless, and that's why it should be supported.
So there's so much there that for us really underpins the ingredients that have gone into our strategy, and I'm sure that there are quite a few things there that really struck you and stood out for you. And you know, those of you that have kind of been in this work for a really long time, it's really interesting to see the themes that have stuck around and are still the case, and then obviously the issues that are quite recent. So our new strategy is unlocking youth work. We really believe that youth work is the catalyst for change that young people need now more than ever. And that's the vision, and that's the goal that we are embarking on. UK Youth's vision is that all young people should be equipped to thrive and empowered to contribute to every stage of their lives. And we've been really deliberate about this sentence and really calling out the word thrive and the word empowered, and really thinking, what does that mean for young people? What does it look like for different types of young people at different stages of their life? UK Youth has influence in power. We're a hybrid organisation, and this is something that I think is really important to draw out, but also it's really important moving forward so that we can be clear what we do and what we do not do. And I just want to focus on that word power. I think I see that word as responsibility. The reality is that we have the ability to make a difference, the ability to make a difference to youth organizations, to youth workers, to young people primarily. And because of that, there's a huge accountability and a responsibility that comes with that. So that's one of the reasons why we pulled it out. I think it matters, the decisions that we make. It matters, the choices that we make. And that's a responsibility that we should bear quite seriously. So when you think about UK Youth, we are a sector supporting infrastructure body. We do think at a sector-wide level. We think about the capacity of the sector, the health of the sector, working alongside others who are thinking about the same things. But we're also a direct delivery partner. So we run programs specifically for young people, and we do those in partnerships with youth organizations. And actually that direct delivery role is a way that we do the work that we do with the sector. It's the way that we support youth organizations. It's the way that we understand what's working out there. So an infrastructure body, a direct delivery partner, but we're also a campaigner for social change. And this is a dial that we're intending to turn up a bit over the next period, because we really believe that there needs to be real change that has to happen across our society for young people to be able to thrive and empowered to contribute. We also work with our nation partners. So we are a UK-wide organisation. We have nation partners right across who we meet with quite regularly. And, you know, even that's an area that we are all thinking quite intentionally about ways to maximise and leverage those partnerships. So you would have noticed that this is our strategic period runs from 2020 to 2025. When I arrived, we were at the end of our previous strategic period, and we were due to start our new strategy last year. Obviously, the pandemic hit, but in hindsight, we really have taken that first year as a foundational year. So we do count it as part of our 5-year period, but it's very much been about laying the building blocks to situate us for the future. So we know that the pandemic has changed the world. The reality is that because of all the things that have happened in the last year and a half, that question about what young people need to thrive has changed. And so it made absolute sense for us to think about our strategy through the lens of a new world. It also made a lot of sense for us to be very clear on our scope of work. I think one of the things that organizations like ours can fall into the trap of is doing little bits of everything, trying to be all things to all people, and actually therefore not being able to make as much of an impact in any given area as we might. And so this strategy is about us making choices, as any good strategy would be. And we are very determined and focused on a particular problem that we want to pour all of our energies into solving. That first year, we spent a lot of time, believe it or not, in the middle of dealing with a global pandemic and being as reactive and supportive to the sector and to young people as we could. We also decided to, you know, do an internal restructure and review everything that we did in terms of that ideal target operating model. We did that work, and so we've looked at our leadership, our structure, looked at our processes, technology, and our culture, and we've almost audited all of those things and understood where we are now and where we'll need to be in order to deliver against this new strategy. One of the things that we are very clear about, going back to that distinctive role that we have as this hybrid organization, is that it makes no sense for an organization like UK Youth to be simply working within a system. I think we have the ability to think about, how does this system need to change? And so our strategy is actually very much about system change. We're quite unequivocal about the idea that we think that this system doesn't work for young people as is currently constructed. And the pandemic brought that into sharp focus. There were too many young people that were left wanting. There were too many revelations of insights from society around whether it's inequality around digital infrastructure, the lived reality of different communities and different types of young people. The reality is that the system as is does not ensure that young people do not fall through the cracks. And therefore, young people are left vulnerable in that system. And actually, there's a lot of onus put on the young person to figure it out and to navigate their way through a really complex system. We don't believe that's fair. We don't believe that's right. And so part of our systems change approach is forcing the system itself to not only improve, but to make sure that it itself is a accessible environment for young people to be able to navigate. The other thing that was really clear to us last year is that we need a thriving youth sector. Young people need a thriving youth sector. We've seen what can happen when the youth sector is equipped to go out and be there for young people. And we've seen what can happen when that isn't the case. And so, again, thinking about 2020 as this very much foundational year, learning year, really doubling down on the insights that we gathered from our networks and from young people and from government, we are clear that the youth sector plays a critical role in supporting young people, but it is woefully underutilized. There is expertise out there, there are resources out there, there are opportunities out there that are being underutilized, and young people are suffering as a result. So we identified some of the key things that the youth sector needs, and we did this through consultation, conversations, through the work that we ended up doing last year. We were able to really pull out, what are these key things that the youth sector needs if it is to thrive in a way that young people require it to. So the first thing is that the youth sector needs a really highly effective advocate. I think across the sector, when working with other organizations, we realized that we were doing so much work to make our case for existing. We were doing so much work to evidence that this is a sector that makes a difference to young people. And if I'm being blunt, there was time wasted having to do that rather than being able to be mobilized to go out there and be there for young people. We were caught up in conversations about, but can you prove it? What do you do? Are you sure? And the reality is that's on us as a sector. We have to think about different ways of being able to communicate our right to exist. You know, you saw that in the video clip. I really relate to that, this idea of we have to find a way of making it clear that youth work is not an optional nice to have. A joined up cross-sector approach. This is such a critical decision for us moving forward. And again, last year really evidenced that for us. This is obviously something I come to from my own experience, but last year really reinforced it for me. Whereas other sectors were thinking about young people from their lens and really trying to deliberate and discuss what support they needed, we were over there trying to demonstrate that we had the right to be in the room. And actually, when we were able to get to those sectors and explain how youth work makes a difference to the very same young people they are trying to work with, I definitely saw things changing. And this idea of what happens if there is a joined up approach pertaining to young people. I honestly think this is transformational, and I know it's difficult, and there's been so much pushback around this, but actually a lot of it comes from it's too hard, and or the professionals themselves may not necessarily see the benefit of it. But when you talk to young people, when you talk to people who do work in a joined up way, that argument fades away, because actually if the young person is truly at the center of what we're trying to do, we have to realize that if we are more joined up, we take the pressure away from the young person. That has to be a win. That has to be something that we think is important. If last year didn't demonstrate the impact of being outdoors, I don't know what will. So now all of a sudden we're not talking about, why does UK Youth have Avon Tyrrell? Why is that something that UK Youth is engaged in? We understand that outdoor learning is a powerful mechanism for youth work. And so we have heard from lots of organizations and networks who would love to engage with more outdoor learning programs and provision. And we think we obviously are able to facilitate that in a really powerful way. But we know now across society that there is something about the exposure to the outdoors and being in different environments that really does benefit a young person's development. Capacity building in terms of workforce development. I think this might be top 3 of the things that I heard over the last year from youth workers, from leaders, from sector supporters in all guises. This opportunity to come together as peers, this opportunity to think about your own professional development within the sector. This is definitely something that there is a need for, there is appetite for, and that was made very clear. And, you know, again, going back to having to make the case for our own existence, this notion of prove it, what works, all of these things. I think there's so many experts out there, so many research bodies, evidence-led bodies that, you know, we don't need to duplicate or replicate things unnecessarily. One of the things that we think was very clear was that even where evidence exists, that does not translate into the ability to embed that solution for your own context, for your own community, for your own young people. And so there is a role there in understanding, how do you translate evidence-based solutions for you and for the young people that you work with? Youth engagement, again, we saw so many opportunities and areas where that was really the spark last year, where you gave young people not just a seat at the table, but shared power, shared decision making, the opportunity to not just be brought in at different stages of development, but to be there from the beginning, to work all the way through, to be there in the execution and the evaluation. Organizations were very candid about their lack of confidence in how to engage all types of young people. And, you know, we saw examples of that when it came to our Young and Black campaign and, you know, the work that we've been doing with I Will, and all of these things. Young, you know, youth organizations, other organizations really speak honestly and rightfully so about how do they make a step change to go from what sometimes feels like tokenistic engagement to meaningful youth engagement. And greater digital skills and expertise. This is also something that we found, obviously the reality of people needing to move and accelerate their digital learning didn't mean that everyone felt comfortable doing that. And now as we think about moving forward, what does a hybrid solution in this space really look like? Those are, obviously there were so many needs that were identified, but we pulled out those specifically because we feel like we have something of value to offer into the ecosystem around those areas. So those are the needs that have shaped our strategic priorities for the coming years. And this goes back to this point I was making about focus. we are being deliberate. We want to be very razor focused on what it is that we want to hold ourselves to account for in terms of turning the dial for young people. So we've really been thinking about what is the problem that we are trying to solve. And our problem is broken down into 3 parts, and everything else you're going to hear is based on our ability to turn the dial on this problem. The first part of it is the lack of investment into youth work. That's the first part of the problem. For young people to be able to thrive, for them to be empowered to contribute, if we really believe in the power of youth work, and we know that if we can unlock youth work, it will make a transformational difference to lives of millions of young people. Well, what's the problem? What's in the way of that? The first part is there's a lack of investment into youth work. The second part is that there is a lack of cross-sector understanding of how youth work makes a difference. The people advocating for youth work cannot just be the youth sector. That is not a step change. Other sectors, other environments need to be saying youth work, youth work, youth work. If we believe it is this powerful tool, then we need to make sure that they understand and can advocate for it just as much as we can. And then that key bit, the limited opportunities to embed effective solutions. We know there are effective practice out there. We know there's quality practice out there. How do we scale it? How do we help people embed those solutions for their context? So that's our problem statement. That's the thing that our strategy is focused on. And so our 2025 strategic goals look like this. We want to flip that problem. In order to do that, we believe we have to build a movement of change. And I think, you know, the term movement gets bounded about quite a bit. We kind of hear it and kind of move on. I want to be very clear that we believe that unlocking youth work is a catalyst for change for young people. We know there are millions, lots and lots of people who care about young people, who care about the needs that our society have to put in place. We believe that youth work is a critical asset in that endeavor. And so we want to build a movement of people who understand that and advocate for that. So we're calling all like-minded individuals, all organizations, government bodies, government groups, businesses, we are calling everyone to join in this movement to unlock youth work in the service of young people. Our strategic goals are therefore the flip of that problem statement. And so just to run through them really quickly, there's resources where you can spend a bit more time on this. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch. But you can notice here is the first part of the problem, so addressing the lack of investment into youth work. Well, our strategic goal, and you'll notice these same 3 words repeated, system change. We want to transform the system to ensure that youth organizations have access to sustained quality provision. You'll notice the key words we've been very intentional about focusing on. So underneath that strategic goal, the organizational objectives for that is that over the next 4 years, we want to impact 1 million young people working in partnership through innovative youth development, outdoor learning, provision. That word provision is going to come up again. It's our catch-all word for programs, experiences, opportunities. It's provision. We want a rich menu of opportunities and engagements for youth organizations to use with their young people, for young people to access and engage with. We want to reach 1 million young people. We chose the word impact. We want to be able to demonstrate that 1 million young people's lives was meaningfully impacted through their ability to engage in this quality provision. We want to increase local access and engagement in quality youth work, including outdoor learning. And we want to channel £30 million into youth work. This is through our UK Youth Fund. We've already seen great appetite for that from funders and from businesses. We want to accelerate that work. But again, I want to really call this out. We're not really interested, this might be controversial, in just funneling money into organizations and moving on, because we've heard from organizations that it sometimes feels like a plaster. It's like a bit of money comes in, great, I've got a reprieve for a set amount of time, I'm right back to not having not being able to long-term plan for my young people, my communities, because that money disappears. We think there's innovation in this space. So we want to channel money in a way that sustainably allows organizations to deepen their impact. The second problem statement is addressing the lack of cross-sector understanding of how youth work makes a difference. The strategic goal there is to transform the system to bring cross-sector leaders and young people together to share, grow expertise, and solve key problems, key issues. Underneath that, the organizational objectives are to increase cross-sector understanding and advocacy of youth work, including outdoor learning, increase the number of individuals and organizations who are demonstratively taking action to embed meaningful co-partnerships with young people, and increase the number of cross-sector individuals demonstratively working together to solve key issues. And our last part is addressing the limited opportunities to embed effective solutions. We want to transform the system to grow the evidence base of what works, working in partnership with others to embed learning and scale quality provision. The organizational objectives underneath that is that we want to become a center of excellence for innovative, evidence-informed youth development content. We want to increase the number of organizations we partner with to effectively embed quality practice. We do not believe we can do any of that without getting our own house in order. And so again, that's the focus of last year, and that's continuing now as well. Our strategic goal that underpins our ability, our license to do any of the things that I've shared, is that UK Youth itself needs to become an employer of choice that builds in a thriving culture of innovation, diversity, and expertise. Underneath that, we want to increase the investment in the diversity of our people, their development, and their experiences. We want to ensure that we have high quality operations and insights that we can learn from, really prioritizing digital data, user-led design. And we have an ambition to deliver transformational growth by really increasing our supporter base. All of that leads to our ultimate impact goal, which ties all of this together. And that is, we believe that if we can unlock youth work as the catalyst of change that young people need now more than ever, and we can deliver against these strategic objectives and organizational goals, how we know that we are moving in the right direction is that we start to see a society that understands, champions, and delivers effective youth work for all. Not just a youth sector that does that, a society that recognizes that, believes in that, advocates and supports that in any shape, way, and form that's required. That's our strategy. That's the overview of it, and we're really excited to be able to talk to you about that. So please get your questions ready. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We've got a Q&A session coming up shortly, but first, over to you, Kaylee.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Ndidi. Yeah, I mean, I've obviously worked so much on the strategy over the last 18 months, but it's still so great to kind of see it in this format and be able to speak about it and share it with you all. I'm delighted now to be able to bring on some of our guest speakers who we really want to have a conversation with about some of the problem statements, what it's really like for practitioners, for young people and for people in different sectors at the moment, and how could we really embed this strategy and think about you know, the problem statements from a local perspective. So I'm delighted to be joined by Loic, Sandy, Katrina and Jaffa. And yeah, we're going to kick off a bit of a conversation about what it means to you, what it means to the work that you're doing. So welcome everyone. It's great to have you all here. It'd be great to kick off with some introductions so everybody knows who you are and the context of the work that you're operating in, and maybe just some initial reflections on the strategy that you just heard from Ndidi. So let's go to Jaffa first.
Afternoon, Kaylee, and afternoon, everyone else. Thank you so much for inviting me to be one of the panelists. So I'm Jaffa Hussain. I'm the chair of the Institute for Youth Work. The Institute is a national sector support body, much like UK Youth, supporting youth workers up and down the country and being that voice and advocating on behalf of youth workers specifically. And I love it, Kaylee. It's fabulous. I think it's really aspirational, but actually that's what we need as a sector. And I love that actually youth workers are central to this as well, because I think often as a sector, we think a lot about young people and we think a lot about the venues and the spaces that they're in. Yeah. And actually it's about how do we support those adults to be the best that they can be, and in particular during a really, really difficult time. So yeah, looking forward to having more discussions with you all over the next 20-25 minutes.
Thanks so much, Shafi. I think that the word youth work and how the prominence of it and the strategy is something that also really excites me from being a youth worker, from being a young person who's experienced this over the years. Yeah, so I totally agree. Thank you. Let's head to Katrina.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Katrina Lambert. Really exciting to be here. So I'm an I Will with the I Will movement, which UK Youth is now involved in supporting, which is all about youth social action and getting young people kind of out there making a difference in the world. And I'm also the co-chair of the Back Youth Alliance, which kind of supports, is a kind of alliance of youth sector organisations, kind of looking at how to support the sector and young people. And yeah, again, really similar, really exciting strategy. I think for me, the thing that's really jumped out is the focus on collaboration, the cross sector, but for me also, working with young people. So, how do we connect youth workers with young people, decision makers with young people, decision makers with youth workers, and do that across different sectors? So that was a really exciting thing to see kind of coming across really strongly. And yeah, really excited to have a bit of a chat about it with this amazing panel.
Amazing. Thanks, Katrina. Let's go to Sandy.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sandy. I run a charity called the Creative Youth Network. So we're a youth organisation based sort of in and around Bristol, do lots of different things, everything from kind of open access to very targeted sort of one-to-one work. And I was really struck at the beginning of the video that Ndidi showed was just that, what is youth work? And there's a whole load of people going, and that's the classic answer, isn't it? So how do we get people talking about us, which I really like as an ambition in the strategy, I think is really important. How do we get people talking about us when our answer is, so that's a real challenge. And I think the answer to that is a lot of it's in the strategy, which is actually about getting out there and working with people, because when they see it, when partner organisations and mums and dads and school teachers and others see what we can do, then that's when we can convince them. And I think Ndidi in this strategy is absolutely right, that we have to get people talking about it, because we've been talking ourselves for years and years about how great youth work is, but we're still in the same position that I was at the beginning of my career 25, 30 years ago, where people haven't quite heard it yet.
I think it's also about how you see it and how you feel it. I love that. But I think, how do you get that message out there? Because yeah, if you're in that and you experience it, you totally understand it. It's almost like an unwritten language, or like something that you just kind of get, but actually it's very difficult just seeing it from a distance if you've just never really been around it. So yeah, I love that. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, and last but definitely not least, Loic. Hi, welcome.
Hi everyone. So I'm Loic. I'm Chief Executive of the Centre for Education and Youth, and I'm one of those people who was a youth worker but was also a teacher, and so that's actually why I set up the Centre for Education and Youth, and so our job is to provide evidence and support to organisations and policymakers that work with young people. And yeah, I've been banging that youth work drum in the corridors of power for quite a while, trying to get that out there. And so this really resonates for me. This idea that people advocating for youth work can't just be the youth workers. I think that's really important. I think actually it might be the case that a lot of the people who hold power in the country are not necessarily the people who've most experienced the benefits of youth work, and I think that can be part of the problem. And so I thought that video at the start, like Sandy, I really liked that. I loved this comment about how, you know, sometimes it looks like not much is happening, and sometimes it's only later down the line that you know how important just one conversation might have been. So yeah, if UK youth can help the sector to find a language to talk about its practice, then I think you will have done something incredibly valuable. So it's great.
Great, thanks so much for them initial reflections. I'd love us to sort of like have a bit more of a conversation about, you know, one of the problem statements we're trying to solve is this like lack of cross-sector understanding. How do we get people to really understand and see and feel and experience like the value that youth work has? So I'd love us just to think about, you know, like what's your current experience of cross-sector working, and like what impact has this had, either in a negative or a positive way? I think we definitely see some really small micro examples of where it might work really well, you know, either in a school perspective or where there's kind of local partnerships, but it's something about how we build that up and the scale and replicate that in different parts, how we really share and embed that learning. So I'd love just to have a conversation about what your experience is currently in the settings that you're working in. We know there's been additional challenges with COVID as well, and why do you think it's critical to really to do this in order to then achieve better outcomes for young people? Maybe Sandy, let's go to you first in terms of like you're operating at a local level, you're running multiple services. Like what's it like where you are?
I wouldn't say it's I'm quite proud of the cross-sector working we do, but it's taken a long time to get there. I mean, we now have mental health specialists embedded within our youth clubs. We have NEET workers supporting young people to get into jobs. So we do have quite a good flow through of young people going from sort of targeted to open access work and back again, small groups. But it's taken a long time to get there. And it's really, I think there's a sort of virtuous circle that needs to happen that we've managed to maintain in Bristol. But I know there's many other places where it's been more difficult because of funding, because we have got a local authority who's willing to invest. We and lots of other organisations are then able to sort of highlight the positive impact of youth work, which then leads to more investment. So the sort of politicians believe it, therefore we can do more of it. Therefore, local authority officers and NHS and others can see the benefit, and therefore there's a sort of virtuous circle happens there. But it does take a long time. And schools take forever to get into and build relationships with teachers, and you have to have an intentional effort to sort of squeeze your way in there. But I think it can work. But I see across the country a very inconsistent, because there's been such a lack of funding for the sector as a whole. We've ended up with organisations doing, everything from housing to just keeping a local youth club open. And therefore it's very difficult to sort of roll out that consistency across the country, which is a huge challenge. The only other thing I would say is also, when you're looking to work with others, you can't just go in with the intention of telling everybody how great you are. You have to learn along the way, actually, and say, okay, we do it this way, but others do it this way. The NHS works in a very different way to us. And we have to learn a lot about how they operate. They're very much more sort of science-based sort of mental health work. So we've been on a learning journey too, and that's really important that you're open to working with others and learning from them, not just trying to impose your own views and ways of working.
That's such a good reflection. So it's much about the sector learning about how others operate as much as it is about how others can learn about the value and the process and methodology around youth work. And it's how we also like build in the resource and capacity, I think, to do that as well. Loic, I'd love to hear from you, from your perception in the work that you do around gathering evidence around these things, but also in terms of your background as a teacher and a youth worker, thinking about some of the challenges that Sandy referred to in terms of, also the pressures that schools are under, sometimes the challenges around people engaging with each other and learning. How do you see that play out in terms of the work you're doing at the Centre for Education and Youth?
Yeah, so for me, I think there's something quite important about everyone understanding the different bits of the jigsaw, and how different types of services and different types of specialists can play their part in fulfilling one part of that jigsaw. So I think that's something I certainly noticed as I transitioned from a youth worker to a teacher, to seeing that it wasn't just a case of transferring the same skills. It was actually I was setting out to do a different job, and I needed to call on a different set of skills to do that. And I think being able to articulate what those different pieces are is really important. So we just published as a team a book called Young People on the Margins earlier this year, which looked at the importance of cross-sector working. That was one of the big themes. And it was really interesting to see as part of that some kind of really nice examples of where people have worked side by side, but recognizing their different roles. So we've seen case studies of social workers being embedded in schools and how that's then affected referrals to children in need and so on. And we've also just finished a study of a project up in Rochdale, which was really about collaboration between schools, police and the youth sector. And there we saw the value of things like teachers and youth workers going out to meet pupils and young people on the streets together and seeing how they interacted and how those young people behaved in different settings, and what that could bring to the relationship of all those different professionals. So I think there's some great examples out there of this type of work, and I think your work, what you're planning to do in terms of articulating the case for the sector, will be really helpful in that too.
Thanks so much. And then Jaffa, I guess from the Institute of Youth Work's perspective, you're supporting youth workers at sort of across the country. Do the things that Loic and Sandy said make sense in terms of seeing how youth workers are operating, the things that they're experiencing? I guess what are your thoughts on that in terms of the cross sector, and also from how youth workers are they currently operating in that space? Are they finding it quite siloed? Is this something that you think is going to make a difference to them?
Absolutely. I think it's hugely going to make a difference, Kaylee. I think the other thing is, youth workers over the last 10 years have had to diversify the type of work that they do. And I know it's something that the Centre for Youth Impact is looking at a lot, along with yourselves and along with ourselves, in terms of youth workers. The traditional youth workers that myself and yourself were used to are unfortunately very few and far between. And what you've got are youth workers doing a bit of arts work and a bit of cultural work and a bit of sports work and all that kind of stuff. And so we at the Institute really want to bring all of those professionals together, because again, that's cross-sector working. And, think about actually where is the similarities as opposed to the differences between someone who works on a football pitch with a group of young men or women doing very youth work based activities embedded in youth work philosophy and principles, to someone doing center-based or detached work. And that's what we're trying to do at the Institute, and then sharing as much of that learning with people like yourselves. And then I also think that the points that Sandy and Loic have referenced around actually how do we then broaden that. But I think what we need to do is get our house in order first, and be as inclusive as we can to those professionals working with young people in that informal, non-formal space, and then start to broaden that and make that much more wider so that other sectors can come on board with us.
Yeah, definitely. So it's about really empowering and building that confidence with the sector we've got, creating that inclusive, cohesive opportunity for the sector as a whole to work together, and then also how we build that profile of youth work in other spaces. That's really interesting. Thank you. And Katrina, I guess what do you see as the impact on young people at the moment, in your role as co-chair of the Black Youth Alliance, and obviously from the work that you're doing in your own community, the fact that that we've recognized this as a problem, what do you think is the impact that that's having on young people at the moment?
I think that, there's obviously the kind of very material things affecting young people that we have evidence on, the kind of health issues, the kind of crime and safety, the education, the sort of things that we can measure. I think we all kind of in this room know about. But I think for me and my kind of understanding, both being a young person and having done lots of work with young people, is at the moment, a lot of young people really feel like they're being ignored or forgotten in society. And that especially, I think that's existed, but over the last kind of year or so has really been amplified. So I think that's created actually a real opportunity for the youth sector to be a vehicle to support young people, not only in these very kind of material, kind of more physical ways, but a way to actually provide a route for their voices to be heard and feel like there's someone there for them, feel like they're being listened to. Because I think the impact of that, like, you know, young people are like, they have concerns and worries, but also have solutions and things that they want to do to fix the world around them, and feel like there's not necessarily an avenue for it. For example, the discussions around education at the moment, as a young person looking at that, it's very focused on attainment, on maths and English and catching up and, you know, all of the learning that we've lost. But actually, a lot of young people, what they've really been missing is the kind of interactions with people, the skills that maybe they aren't getting. And that, I think a lot of the concerns that young people have and that feeling like they're not being listened to actually can be very much addressed by the youth sector, which is why this kind of cross sector collaboration is really important to join up the dots there. So, you know, if education's having to focus really heavily on attainment, then actually is there a role that the youth sector can play in supporting that skills development and kind of opportunities to have your voice heard? So I think that for me is something which is really, it's difficult to capture, it's difficult to measure, but I can see, at least just from the people here, there's a lot of nodding, that kind of, yeah, feeling like there's not someone listening is something that I think that this strategy potentially, you know, has potential to build a youth sector that can actually capture those voices and make sure there's an avenue for them to be heard. So that's something which I think is a real opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we hear from young people so much that they feel that there's no one listening. You know, all you have to do is look around and see what we're seeing through some of the research and the media, and like it's very clear, like a lot of young people, you know, would relate to that and feel that as well. I'd just love to open up to the rest of the panelists to give any reflections on what Katrina's just said, because I think it's sort of like, yeah, really hit the nail on the head.
An interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I think actually the pandemic in some ways has leveled the playing field, and certainly in around the Bristol, people did listen to young people more. We had more people, sort of decision makers, politicians, business leaders and things, coming to our sort of showcase bits of work with and heard young people's stories. But I fear that's fading away now as we sort of go back to normal again, if that's the thing. But I wonder, I guess when we're all in the same boat and we don't quite know what to do, everybody wants to hear from everybody, but we're going back to the old days of everybody thinking they already know the answers and so don't need to listen to anybody else. That's just an observation. It's not particularly helpful, but again, it comes down to us. We've got to keep pushing out what we're doing. We've got to get our message out there. We're the vehicle to help young people's voices reach the decision makers. And I think it was sort of summed up to me the other day. I was in one of my staff meetings and I discovered that we're opening a new youth club in one of the poorer areas of the city, and they didn't think to tell anybody that this was a big thing. They're just getting on with it and they're doing a fantastic job. And I was like, guys, this is a big deal. We're opening reopening a youth club. And how is it that we get, I think as youth workers, we often sit back and don't talk about what we're doing. We're just so proud of it, but we sort of sit in a little bubble. And that means actually that other people don't know what we do, but also we're not being the best vehicle that we can be for young people's voices, which is what Katrina said. If people don't know that we're doing great work, they won't listen to the young people that we're working with. But there's something naturally sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? We tend to step back as youth workers and not shout about ourselves enough, and therefore about the young people. And it's something we have to get over and do better.
Yeah, and I think Katrina's point about the whole, you know, pupils returning to school and should the teachers focusing on the academic learning and so on, but how about the interactions and how about all those relationships and so on is a classic example of that different pieces of a jigsaw piece I was talking about. So I was involved in quite a lot of conversations with the DfE about the whole idea of summer schools this year. And a whole load of attention there was about, should this be focusing on relationships and enrichment, or should it be focusing on academic learning? Similarly, how do we deal with the fact that teachers have been so busy that we don't really want them working through the whole summer? And I kept saying, yes, but how about this whole youth sector, third sector, everyone else who could come in and play a part in this? You know, the sector's raring to go and would love to be involved in supporting a large scale program to give the young people, the next generation, a really amazing summer this summer. that doesn't need to all go down to teachers. Yes, maybe teachers can be involved in an element of academic learning as part of that, but we really need to widen up the resources we're calling on when we're trying to support young people.
Yeah, I think it's how we can provide that those opportunities from a policymaker level for collaboration there as well, and how we can mobilize all of our networks behind that to try and enable that to happen. I think that's really important. Jaffa, any sort of final reflections from you in terms of on Katrina's point around youth voice and really listening to young people?
As someone who's been through that journey, Kaylee, it's so important, isn't it? And I think for me, it's how do we do it in a way that isn't tokenistic? And I can't remember who mentioned it. I think it was Sandy that, you know, as we perhaps start to move towards a new normal or whatever they want to call it, that is my real worry, is that this youth voice element isn't there, but also that there's geographical differences, and it's great, Sandy, to hear that actually down south that's being taken seriously on board, and that things are changing. Unfortunately, I feel that the north is still suffering significantly from not knowing how to do this properly, and I think that's where UK Youth can absolutely fill a gap in terms of supporting people to better understand what is youth voice and the beautiful kind of diversity within it, and how that can be implemented across various different sectors.
I think we definitely see our role as well in amplifying where things are working really well, or where there's other partners who are operating in different spaces, whether that's, you know, youth voice or specific really targeted bits of youth work, and how UK Youth can enable like the sharing of that best practice to happen. So yeah, really on board with those points. I feel like we could talk for about all day about all of this stuff, but I want to kind of end this by you know, the goal Ndidi talked about, which was like, you know, a society that really champions and delivers youth work for all. Like, what does that mean for you in your setting? And you know, yeah, just if you can try and kind of think about that from your perspective. I'd love to hear people's reflections to wrap up. So who shall I pick on first? I think, Katrina, let's start with you in terms of a young person's perspective.
Well, I think for me, it's something around, like, I think we've mentioned it a lot, articulating what youth work is and why it matters, but also capturing the diversity of what exists within youth work. So my experience as a young person, I didn't realize until several years into my kind of, you know, journey of like youth social action and being involved with youth work, that I was actually being involved with youth work and was working with youth work, or I hadn't joined the dots. And it was until I kind of entered a slightly different space and heard people talking about it, I was like, oh, that language totally matches up with my experience, but had just never connected those dots. And that was my experience as a young person involved in youth work. So when you step back to, you know, a policymaker looking at, you know, the entire kind of sector of, you know, young people, it's likely that they might not be able to also join those dots. But I think it also shows that, you know, youth work is not, it's not one thing. It does capture several different elements, and there is so much diversity across different young people's experiences, different localities and regions. So I think that in terms of kind of championing the sector and making it strong, making sure that we can make our case, but part of what makes our case is the fact that youth work can adapt and be diverse and meet the needs of young people in a way that, for example, health will always be focused on the health specifically of young people, whereas youth work can capture elements of health while also looking at all these other things that we've talked about. So for me, it would be articulating what is youth work and why is it important, but ensuring that we still capture the diversity of what youth work is.
Absolutely love that. Yeah. And I think that's such a great opportunity. And I'm sure will also be a challenge, referring back to the video that Sandy mentioned that Ndidi showed at the start, which I think that's the issue, isn't it? Around that's what we need to try and articulate, all of those things that you just said. But yeah, absolutely love that. Thank you so much. Jaffa, let's go to you.
Kaylee, I'm really sorry. Can you just repeat the question?
So it was
one of those days.
So our impact goal, which was a society that champions and delivers youth work for all. Like, what does that ambition mean to you in your current role and setting? Like, what would it mean if we achieved that?
It would mean young people having very, very similar experiences to the one that I had, Kaylee. I was fortunate to be involved in youth work in the early 2000s, or to be a young person in the early 2000s. And my gosh, what a time, right? What a time. And I think the only issue that I had, or the only issue on reflection that I had about that time, was that the voluntary sector wasn't as involved, I believe, or as engaged. And just imagine it, the voluntary sector with the local authority and the statutory sector coming together. It is phenomenal, clearly. And that would mean young people are having tremendous experiences. Youth workers are consistently and constantly developing themselves. There's leadership roles that they can take on and really flourish. And young people come through the system. You know, I am one of those young people who came through the system. And it's such a shame that such a thing doesn't exist now. So for me, if we fast forward, that is what it would look like, a really holistic package of support where all sectors are working so collaboratively together for the benefit of youth workers, but also thinking about, for the benefit of young people, sorry, but also thinking about where youth workers play a part in this and how collectively we can support both sides of the same agenda, really.
Brilliant. And Sandy, how does that then translate into, you know, a leader of a local organisation and someone operating at that local and regional level? What would that look like for you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, for me, ultimately, what you want is all the services that a young person might need are there, you know, whether that's a local youth club that they can pop into and see their friends, or that more intensive support if they need it. And for me, I think, you know, the consistency is the key thing, actually. I think we're so diverse, and that is really good in a lot of ways, but actually it means that some areas have lots of services, some don't, some are delivered by local authorities, some are delivered by the voluntary sector, and I think that confuses government. And I think this is the key role actually that UK Youth can play on our behalf, is to try and build that consistency so that we can start to answer some of those national questions that the central government will inevitably have about how we support young people. I think because there's been a lack of investment, we've ended up being very inconsistent, good but inconsistent across lots of areas, and therefore we're not really, it's part of the reason we're not really seen as the answer. So I think that's the key role that UK Youth can play. But then locally, I think what that means, as I said at the beginning, is really working with other agencies, trying to build those relationships with other agencies, because that's how we will get those people, other people, talking and shouting about youth work and acting on our behalf, which we haven't managed to achieve yet. And I think, you know, I see a couple of the comments in the chat. You know, we have been saying this as a few of us now who've been around for quite a long time. And if we're feeling frustrated that people aren't listening, then maybe we're not saying it right. You know, maybe we need to look at how we're talking about it and how we're working with others. Because they're not hearing what we're saying, and that's a challenge to us as well as to central and local government to really, you know, core fund us and work with us. So I think it's a reflection on both sides.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, really great reflections, and I agree. I think it's something about how we look at, you know, how are we going to articulate this? How are we going to work with others, and not just about how others are going to work with us. So Loic, like from your perspective, you know, operating in sort of, I guess, a dual space in some ways, and at that policy level, what would it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think something I talk about quite often is kind of the importance of giving young people the freedom to write their own life story. And I think for me, that's what one of the things the youth sector can do, you know, giving young people, playing its part in giving young people that freedom to write their life story. I think that needs to be available for everyone. If you look at this virtual room, I think all of us have a life story that has been partly defined and enriched by the youth sector and by youth workers, and I think that needs to be open to all. I think in addition to some of the challenges Sandy raised, if you look at youth work, it sort of suffers from several of the problems that policymakers have, which are that they really struggle with things that are universal, they struggle with things that are preventative, they struggle with things that are very long term, and they struggle with things where outcomes are hard to define. So it's no surprise. I mean, partly it's about how well we tell our story, tell the story of youth work and what it's all about, but it is also about the fact that we're slightly victim to those four perennial challenges of policy making. So I think any strategy to make sure that everyone benefits from the things we benefited in terms of youth workers will need to come up with ways of navigating those four big obstacles.
Brilliant. Love that. Yeah, I love that the bit that you just said about young people writing their own life story. I think that it's about choice, isn't it, for young people at the end of the day. Brilliant. Thank you so much to you all for taking up your time to join us today. Really great to hear your reflections, challenges, opportunities, and really great to be working with you, obviously, on this moving forward. So thank you so much. Like I said, I'm sure we could speak about this for the next for a whole afternoon, but we are going to wrap up, and I'm going to hand back to Ndidi, who's going to take us to the next part of the webinar with some questions and answers with our leadership team. So Ndidi, I'll hand over to you. We've just launched a poll as well, so do feel free to answer that if it's hopefully it's popped up on your screen. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. I was furiously trying to tweet there, so there was so much richness in that. So thank you all so much again for joining us. So that's Loic, Sandy, Katrina, and Jaff. You can contact, make sure that you can reach out to all of them. You see their organizations there, they're all on social, so please do continue to tap into that wisdom that we've just heard. Brilliant. So now this is our opportunity to get into some questions. I've seen some of them come through. I think some people are using a chat, some people are using a Q&A. I think I'm going to have to try and navigate these questions. So if you could maybe put your questions in the Q&A just so that I don't lose them, that would be really great. And I'm relying on the team to help me if I've lost anything. But so we're interested in your reflections. They don't have to be questions. You could have a reflection, thoughts about what you've heard so far, and then obviously questions that you may have as well. I am absolutely delighted to introduce some of the senior leadership team of UK Youth. And this is our opportunity to introduce them and you to get to know them and their thinking about this. But obviously, I'm hoping they can answer some of the questions as well. So that's my get out of that. So these are just some of our senior leadership team. But this is us getting to the heart of our strategy. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce Maddie, David, Lindsay, and Kaylee back again. So I'll stop sharing so you can see their lovely faces. Hi, team. Brilliant. So I think just to kind of maybe kick off, I thought it would be really interesting if people just heard a little bit about each of you. You've all had quite long journeys with UK Youth, some longer than others, and so just give people a bit of a background into you. So David, why don't we start with you, the newbie at UK Youth?
Thank you. I am not a newbie at UK Youth. I have been with us for over 10 years is what I normally say, and I thoroughly enjoy it, I guess. I'm fortunate enough to be the Director of Outdoor Learning, and I'm based down in the New Forest National Park. And what we do is really direct delivery to young people. So we get it, I guess, is what I'd say, because we see it. Outside my window at the moment, there are about 60 or 70 young people having lunch as a break in a day, and in their groups, or their bubbles, as they should be. But it's just constant reminder of what we're here for and what it's all about. And I have to say that I've been with the charity quite a while, and this is probably the best strategy I've ever seen us produce. It's got a real heart to it and real meaning, and I think we can do something really special over the coming 2 or 3 years to deliver it and make that difference that's needed for young people.
No pressure for David. Brilliant. And Lindsay, why don't we hear from you?
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay. I'm Director of External Relations at UK Youth. So I've been with UK Youth for about 4 years. I'm based in North Wales. the kind of remit for my role is working with the teams around income generation for the organisation, our engagement and supporter experience work, and our digital marketing and communications teams. So essentially thinking about how we communicate and engage stakeholders to secure support and funding for our work and the work of the sector. Yeah, lovely to meet you all.
Brilliant. Maddie?
Hi, I'm Maddie. I know a lot of you well already, I think. So I've been with UK Youth, I think probably 5 years, if Lindsay's been there for 4 years. And in that time have had 3 roles. So originally Director of National Programmes, and then in my role as Deputy Chief Exec is how I probably know a lot of you when I was looking after our movement. And then I've just come back from maternity leave as Chief Programme Officer, which I'm super excited about. So for those of you that don't know, we've brought together our design and delivery functions kind of under my remit. So really looking at designing from a human-centric perspective and delivering, bringing all of our provision in one place.
Brilliant. Kaylee, I think you've introduced yourself, but do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
But in terms of my role of Director of Collective Action, sort of I'll be leading on the work to really bring together our cross-sector networks, our partnerships, and looking at how we really mobilise people to take action around our strategic goals. So really excited to be working on that. And as someone who went to a youth club and now have the privilege of working at UK Youth, I'm just really excited about the possibility and the opportunity to really enable all young people to have access to youth work. So yeah, really excited.
Brilliant. So let's kick off with what we've just heard. I don't know about you, but I was furiously just reflecting on so much of those insights. I wonder if we could everyone just share a little bit about what kind of really stood out for you in the conversation that we just heard from the panel, and or if it makes you think about kind of our next steps in any particular way. But Lindsay, I wonder if you wanted to kick off on that, just your reflections from the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was great to hear so much recognition for the kind of the need for collaboration and bold action. And I think when I was listening to the conversation and some of the comments on social channels, is that, and what we're thinking about as a department is how do we bring that sense of urgency to how we talk about what we do? I think there is, in some sectors, some people's views that kind of youth work is misunderstood, obviously, but also it's a nice to have. And I think the conversations we're having about how we kind of really cut through and build our supporter base and grow the support and investment in youth work means that actually it needs to be the same as people view kind of the health service or emergency services more broadly, or teaching. And I think that's kind of an area for us that we're really thinking about with our engagement and communications work, about how we make that connection to people about what we do, and therefore build the support and income that we need in order to keep delivering what we all do. But that was kind of the standout for me.
Yeah, I definitely got that, the sense of urgency and the sense of opportunity, that in terms of if we get this right, as David said, there's a real opportunity here to do something significant for young people. Just on that point, David, was there anything in particular that you heard that really resonated for you?
Yeah, well, there was quite a few points actually. I thought it was an interesting discussion. I think probably I would select a couple of things, if I may. The first thing is, I think the realization that cross-sector support and working together is essential for all of us. And it just strikes me, and I call it the contextual environment for a young person, if you like. And it just saddens me really that we haven't got this right even now. It's not about organizations, it's about the young person in the center of that. And clearly the panel understand we've got a challenge there still, although there are small glimmers of light, I think, as said. And the other thing, Jaffa talked about youth work, and he didn't just talk about the youth worker, he talked about it can be done in different environments. And I think that understanding of how many ways you can do work with young people is good to start to spread, because then I think the more people understand it, the more they'll actually buy into. Yeah, it doesn't just have to be a youth worker down a youth club. It's the football coach, it's the hockey coach or whatever, or it's the we have orchestras that visit us, and it's the people that lead that. There's lots of ways to add value to a young people's lives.
Yeah, that really struck me as well, actually, Jaffa's point about the diversity that exists within youth work practice itself, and how so much, and we know this in terms of even our endeavors to, break through cross-sector bubbles, there are connotations that immediately come up when people think of youth work that I think do such a disservice to the wide variety. And so I thought that was just a really striking reality. But the thing that I really took away was that even within the sector, there is an understanding necessarily of the variety, and how the sector itself can draw on the expertise of other professionals within the sector. I just thought that was brilliant, really powerful point. Maddie, what stood out for you?
Loads obviously stood out. Really, really interesting discussion. And I feel like I've got my paper here, like thinking about how we can embed it all and think about it in response. But I guess one thing that Sandy said, like in addition to the things that have already been said, was around this point of consistency. And I guess I've always thought about that and thought about it in relation to, how can we take a consistent approach in order to kind of replicate good practice and scale and spread what we do. And what, from my department's role is that in terms of really working with youth workers to understand that and design solutions to that. But also a really interesting point in terms of like around consistency then being the problem in terms of an understanding for others, because there isn't this consistent approach and how it's delivered, and because it's difficult to articulate, that's kind of some of the stumbling blocks. So thinking about it from that perspective as well was really interesting for me, alongside a lot of other things.
I mean, Kaylee, you were in it, but like, was there any one particular moment that you were like, oh, that's really interesting?
I think for me, like Katrina's last reflections around actually what does it mean for a young person if we're able to, really achieve our strategic goal in terms of choice, in terms of recognizing that this is something that they've been through, and they understand, and how young people can just recognize like that because I think her reflection on the fact that she didn't even realize it was youth work until like a bit later. I mean, that's not to say, when you rock up to a youth club, it's like, oh, this is youth work and this is the thing that you're going to, because part of it is around exploring where young people want to get to. But I think that just really resonated with me in terms of that and the youth voice element, how we really embed youth voice, and not just in that kind of structural sense, but how we enable kind of all sectors and people working with young people to really actually listen to young people, and not just say they're doing it, but actually really doing it, and then developing services off the back of that. I think, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just before we jump into questions, and they are coming in now, hot and fast, I hope you're ready. I loved Loic's final kind of reflection on I was just about to tweet it, the giving all young people the freedom to write their own story.
Yeah, I love that.
And I just think, like, obviously he's just written a book, so maybe all of that is still, but I just thought that was brilliant. So such a beautiful way of summarizing it and thinking about our vision and like, empowering young people. I just thought, the agency, the belief, the confidence to know you can write your own story, and then a system that enables you to do that. I just think that's such a powerful way of thinking about it. So thank you. Clearly you can see, panel, that we are very stimulated by your thoughts. And I will just say that that's very similar to what we spent so much of last year doing. And even leading up into this strategy, this strategy sits on a year and a half at least of work leading into 2020, and lots of conversations, lots of rich insights. And so one of the things that I feel really excited by is I think we are so confident it's the right strategy because we've heard from so many voices, and now it really is about executing it. So let's jump into some of these questions. Oh, there's so many now, I don't know where to start. So let's start with Kev. Kev Henman says, saying we have to join up cross-sector is accurate. How will you strive to achieve this and align with other national youth bodies? Great question. Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to have a go. So I think for me, it's really about working closely with the back people like in the Back Youth Alliance and other national bodies, really aligning around what are our shared vision and our shared goals, having a really clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve as an organisation, and also like what others are trying to achieve, and really aligning on those bits that really cross over. You know, we're all sort of doing this to really improve outcomes for young people, looking for opportunities to collaborate, whether it's on, you know, policy asks, you know, developing content or opportunities for young people. And I think it's also about how we also communicate what we're doing as an organization, so people can also then support that. And I think then it's about really mobilizing the networks that we're working with to really amplify the policy asks we're trying to make, and having that shared approach to that for me.
Yeah. Thanks, Kev. I hope that was a good answer. I know we have lots of conversations about that, and I think it is definitely something we want to be deliberate about. Question from Phil. Maybe Maddie, you can pick this one. As both a national infrastructure body and a major direct delivery provider, how do you see any potential conflict of interest in representing the sector to stakeholders, influencing the way forward, and being advantageously placed to directly deliver? Love that question. But it's also something we talk about quite a lot, isn't it, Maddie? So go for it.
Good question. I mean, I think the first point to say is just around collaboration, which I know has been a theme of the whole day, but we are, you know, genuinely here to collaborate. We don't see that this strategy is achievable on our own, as you will have seen. And so in order to do that collaboration, we need to really understand the needs of youth workers, of young people, and put them at the heart of our design work. And in doing so, we are hoping to bring obviously others along the journey with us in terms of that development piece. So I don't see that we would be at a position where we're kind of developing something in isolation that and not joining that to the conversations that we're having in terms of reflecting and advocating for the sector. Like for me, that's one of the same things. So some of the problem statements that we might want to be putting through kind of the design space could come up with like, this is what we need to do from a provision perspective, but alongside that, this is the advocacy piece that we need to be doing. And from that provision perspective, like, you know, if there are things that are already working, if there are things already happening, we, you know, we want to be able to step back and let those things happen where they've been evidenced and they're working well, and support how we can scale and spread that working. It's not about us coming up with solutions on our own and just delivering those on our own. And so with that approach, I feel like we wouldn't be in a situation where there's a big conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree, and just feel like we talk about this all the time. And one of the things that, you know, Lindsay can vouch, and Maddie's very, very passionate about this point, is that we're actually not interested in just doing things for doing them sake. And we will turn things down. We will not do something if we don't think it's the right thing to do. So one of the things that we want to do is to be able to proactively go out to people and say, actually, these are the things that do need to be delivered, because we've heard that from the sector, we've heard that from young people. So it's a risk possibly in terms of like not chasing the money or funding, but it's a bet that we're placing, because we think ultimately not only is that the right thing to do, but we actually think that's what will actually create long-term sustainable or sustainability for the sector. So it's, you know, anyone is really interested, like, you know, Maddie has lots of thoughts about the way that we just need to be user-led in the way that we think about our work. So we want to hold ourselves to account on that. This next question, maybe David, you can pick up on it. I thought it was a really interesting one from Fatima here. and maybe talk a bit more about what we do at AT. What advice would you give to someone who has never done youth work as such, but has experienced life with many teenagers who've gone through challenges in life, involvement with police, schools, social services, numerous other organizations, who has seen the failure of these institutions and seen how youth have grown into young adults who have been let down by the system? Now this individual would like to set up something unique to help the youth going through similar circumstances.
So thank you for the question, Fatima. I'll probably disagree with you, but so it sounds like you probably have done youth work. You probably, again, it's just how you name it and how you call it out, but I think you probably have, judging by the experiences you're talking about. I think for the individual themselves, I would say that need to just draw out where their heart lies and where they really want to focus. And I think as an organization, we'd be glad to have a conversation with the person that you're talking about and just see if we can help them on their journey. I mean, and then Didi said, there's so many different ways to look at this, I think, and that's the big thing we're talking about, really. Obviously, our side is outdoor learning, and we run apprenticeships here. I don't even know how old this person is, but maybe that's a journey that they would like to be interested in to start to help young people develop. Or there's obviously other youth work avenues that you can go down as a professional, or if you're thinking about building your own organization. I mean, that's a challenge, but it's a doable challenge. And again, just we could take this offline, share contact details, whatever, and try and explore and help the individual fulfill their dream, which is something that we want to do. So any way we can help.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, David. Thank you, Fatima. Probably got time for one more question, and then I'm going to go to Rob's in a moment, maybe. And Lindsay, maybe you can answer this one. But just to share Chloe's reflection, I believe in systems change, not just to continue in the same way, because that's the way we've always done it. If it's not working, it needs to change. Chloe, I feel like you've literally gone into my brain and like pulled that. I feel that so passionately. And that's my biggest counter to people who say, oh, joined up working is not going to work. It's, it's too difficult. My question is how's what you're doing working for you? That's the question. Like, is it working for young people? And if it's not, I just don't know how we don't address that. So yeah, I'm with you. Connect, Chloe, would love to talk more. Last question, let's do Rob's question. Rob Kenyon here says, I was really fantastic points today, very strong message that young people shouldn't be expected to navigate a broken system in order to thrive. I was really interested by the reflection on how a lot of time was wasted on trying to prove what you do works. Really important as funders that we get the balance right between an insistence that projects we fund provide evidence of success and trust that you are delivering. What do you think the balance here is, and how can funders get closer to this? Feel like this might be your wheelhouse, Lindsay. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a really challenging point that you raised, Rob. And I think that there are some audiences, funder audiences, that are doing more in this space. So there's a lot of work at the moment with some trusts and foundations like, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, Paul Hamlin, and the National Lottery Community Fund that are really trying to tackle this head on and start thinking about how they obviously collaborate more and support organisations without kind of these questions keep coming back to us and having to provide lots of the same information. But I think there are still our experience of working with corporate partners and individuals is that, people do want to know that their funding is making a difference, and we have to be able to provide that. And I think that doesn't necessarily always need to be in the form of kind of hard statistics and, outputs and data in that way. I mean, obviously all of those things are needed at times, but actually just being able to communicate stories and to demonstrate the difference that the work that has been done has made to an individual, because we know that that's what resonates with us all as humans. It's the personal connection and seeing that. So I think if we can do better at both of those things together and support those sectors that are maybe not where we might want them to be on that journey, because obviously they've got, if I think about a corporate partner, they've got a board, they've got kind of maybe more traditional reporting requirements coming to them from a commercial perspective. How do we support them on that journey to think about their contribution to the bigger picture rather than just a specific input? So definitely thinking about how we can be more strategic and bring people together around kind of common areas of interest.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There were a few more questions here, but Kaylee, hopefully we can capture them and respond somehow, because I think there's some really good ones here as well. But thank you, SLT. Thank you, Lindsay, Maddie, David, Kaylee. We're going to let these guys pop off in a minute, and then I think we're coming to a close. So just a couple of things. Like, we're always asked, how can people get involved? And we would be foolish to bring you all together and not kind of share some really tangible ways that you can get involved in the work of UK Youth. So I think the first thing just to say is that we want you to get involved. Every single person that's listening that has engaged today, we believe that you have a really valuable role to play in this movement, not only in terms of what you could add to what we've set out to do, but also our ability to connect with your work and to amplify your work and to understand your insights and expertise. So again, one of the things that we're very much thinking about is trying to build kind of different portfolios around our work and be really clear on the different ways that people engage with this strategy and with our movement. And so one of them is network. So basically, as Kaylee was saying, Kate, we are moving very much to a collective action approach. And so we want to build networks at the peer-to-peer level, cross-sector networks, young people, and then all of those different categories connected together. And so we really want to lean into a network theory, network approach. We believe that this is the way of kind of adding capacity, but us not being the drivers all the time. That if we can create the spaces for people to find each other, discover each other, not waste effort duplicating things, we think good things will happen. You heard me say the word provision earlier. Provision is our catch-all portfolio for programs, for experiences, for our outdoor learning work, for all the things that are about what tangibly are you giving to young people or to youth organizations to enable them to enact the change that we're trying to see. And then advocacy. So obviously all of our storytelling work, our campaigning work, our work to really amplify this work. So if you are interested in getting involved either via our networks or under our provision or through our advocacy, please email movement@ukyouth.org and just say you want to get in touch or you want to find out a bit more. Obviously, you can also go to our website and find out a bit more there. But just to leave you, there are a couple of or few programs that are live right now that are kind of partnership collaborations that we're really excited about and that we think are really potential big bets that will really kind of create quite a significant step change in our endeavors. The first is the I Will work, and most of you hopefully are very familiar with the I Will campaign, phenomenal 10-year campaign to really embed social action as an everyday experience for young people. And so there is something called the Power of Youth Charter. You may have heard Power of Youth was trending a few weeks ago. Check out that hashtag if you want to understand a bit more, but this is something that we're really excited to be working with Volunteering Matters on in terms of secretariat in this work. And if you want to find out a bit more about how you can engage your young people in social action and in the campaign more broadly, do get in touch. We are super excited to be working with the Centre for Youth Impact on essentially like at the moment it's a web platform, but it's a initiative to really capture the insights of the professionals that work with young people. So it's called Just One Question. Every week we send out a question around the experience of being a practitioner, the experience, and we're collating all of those things because, again, we were asked so many of these questions over the last year and a half, and there wasn't a really ready, easy, live way of saying, yeah, here, this is what the sector is thinking and feeling now. This is something we really believe has impact potential. Some of you may be familiar with Teacher Tap. It's you know, for me, it's like the youth sector version of that. Teacher Tap, every day now, 8,000 teachers are engaging with that. And it is a thing that people walk into government meetings with, funding meetings with, to say, this is what the sector needs. We need an equivalent in our sector. And, you know, we think the Centre for Youth Impact is incredibly well positioned to, as a partner, to drive on that. Youth card, very, very excited about this. So one of the things we talk about is how do we meet young people where they are, as opposed to always expecting young people to come to us. There's only particular types of young people that are going to be able to discover the provision that is available to them. Youth card, again, is very similar to Young Scots and the kind of the vision of what they've done over there, where it is it's embedded into the fabric of Scotland. And, you know, we believe that we can do the same here. So this is a partnership with Speakers for Schools, with Young Enterprise. It's an app, it's live now. You can download Youth Card. And if you want to get your provision onto Youth Card, let us know. We want to help young people discover what is around them. And the only way we can do that is to put your service, your program, your youth club onto Youth Card. So get in touch if you want to do that. Please get in touch. And then finally, we have just come to the end of our first season of our new podcast called Are You Convinced? This is a podcast that was specifically designed to bring the worlds of education and youth services together. So along with my co-host, Laura McInerney, who's an education journalist and former teacher and the founder of Teacher Tap, we debate issues that really are trying to put the issue at the center and thinking about the ways that the different professionals think about that issue. So it's available on any platform that you listen to podcasts. Check it out. Let us know what you think. And we're really interested in guests for season 2. So get in touch if you want to be involved in that as well. So that is it. That is all from us. Nothing left to say other than thank you for taking the time to engage with us in this way. Hopefully you would have seen partnership and collaboration is the key tenet right across our vision and our strategy. We will not do anything on our own. We want to work as a collective. And so please do think about getting involved. If you're not connected to UK Youth, why not? Figure out a way of getting involved, get in touch with us. We want to connect with you. We want to understand what you're doing and do more together. It is a bold ambition. There's a lot here, but we believe so powerfully in this vision. And we believe that if we can unlock youth work, it really is the catalyst of change that young people need now more than ever. Join us. Take care. Thank you very, very much. Take care. Have a good week, day, all the good stuff. God bless everyone. Thank you.